My husband cheated on me with his ex for a year behind my back, so I legally stole his only child. I thought Damien and I had the perfect marriage, 12 years together, built from nothing into something beautiful. We met in our early 20s when we were both broke and dreaming big. He was studying law while working nights at a warehouse. I was finishing my psychology degree while waitressing at a diner that served coffee so bad it could strip paint. Our first apartment was a studio with a radiator that sounded like a dying elephant, but we were happy. We'd eat ramen noodles by candlelight and plan our future. Damien would become a partner at a prestigious firm. I'd open my own practice. We'd have kids, travel the world, grow old together. When Damien's ex-girlfriend Bridget called 3 years into our marriage, I wasn't worried. She was pregnant and claimed it was his from a one-night mistake during a work conference. The timeline was impossible. Damien had been home with me that entire week, sick with the flu. I held his head while he vomited, brought him soup, never left his side, but the DNA test came back positive. I don't understand, Damien kept saying, staring at the results. This doesn't make sense. Bridget was a mess. Unemployed, addicted to pills, living in her car. She wanted money, not a baby. When little Camden was born, she signed over full custody to Damien without a fight. $5,000, and she disappeared. Camden became my world. I was the one who walked the floors during colicky nights. I taught him to walk, to talk, to tie his shoes. When he had nightmares, he called for me. When he scraped his knee, I was the one who kissed it better. Damien worked long hours building his career, so I handled everything. Doctor appointments, school meetings, birthday parties. By the time Camden turned 7, Damien had made partner. We bought a house in the suburbs with a white picket fence and a swing set in the backyard. From the outside, we looked like the American dream. Then I found Bridget's phone hidden in Damien's briefcase. The messages went back 18 months. Photos I won't describe. Plans to meet at hotels during his business trips. And the most devastating text of all. Can't wait until she figures it out and we can finally be a real family with our son. Our son. I sat in my car outside Camden's school, hands shaking as I scrolled through months of lies. Every business trip. Every late night at the office. Every time he came home smelling like unfamiliar perfume and claiming it was from a colleague's hug. But the worst part wasn't the cheating. It was realizing that Camden, my Camden, wasn't some random mistake. Damien and Bridget had been together the entire time. The pregnancy wasn't an accident. The DNA test wasn't a surprise to them. I'd been raising the child of my husband's secret relationship. That night, I pretended everything was normal, made dinner, helped Camden with homework, kissed them both goodnight. But inside, I was planning something that would change all our lives forever. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the law office where I'd done my graduate internship. My former supervisor, Patricia, was now a family court judge. We'd kept in touch over the years, sharing coffee and complaints about the legal system. I need advice, I told her over lunch. Hypothetically, if someone discovered their spouse had been lying about paternity and custody arrangements, what legal options might exist? Patricia raised an eyebrow. That's quite a hypothetical. Are we talking about fraud, misrepresentation, parental alienation? I chose my words carefully. All of the above, potentially. She leaned forward. If someone could prove deliberate deception in establishing custody, especially if they'd been acting as the primary caregiver under false pretenses, the courts would take that very seriously. Custody isn't just about biology. It's about the best interests of the child. That afternoon, I contacted a private investigator named Reynolds. Within 2 weeks, he documented everything. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even security footage of Damien and Bridget together during times he'd claimed to be working. The evidence painted a clear picture of an ongoing relationship that predated Camden's conception by at least 6 months. More damaging was what Reynolds discovered about the original custody arrangement. Bridget hadn't just signed over her rights for $5,000. Damien had paid her an additional $15,000 to disappear and never contest custody. The courts had never been informed about this financial arrangement, which constituted fraud. But the smoking gun came from Bridget herself. Reynolds found her working at a casino 3 states away, still struggling with addiction, but desperate for money. When he offered her $2,000 for an honest statement about Camden's paternity, she broke down completely. I never wanted to give him up, she sobbed into the camera. Damien said it was temporary, that once his wife found out about us, we'd get Camden back and be a real family. He promised we'd be together. He said she was just the babysitter until we could make it official. The recording was 18 minutes of devastating admissions. How they'd planned the pregnancy. How Damien had coached her through the fake surprise call. How the DNA test had been legitimate, but the timeline had been a lie. Damien had never been sick that week. He'd been with Bridget at a hotel, planning their future while I slept alone in our bed. He said she was stupid enough to raise our kid for free while we figured things out. Bridget continued. Said she'd never question anything because she was so desperate to be a mother. He used to laugh about how she'd rush to change diapers and do night feedings while he got his sleep. Called her the perfect unpaid nanny. The cruelty in those words hit me like physical blows. Every sleepless night, I'd walk the floors with a colicky baby. Every fever, I'd monitored alone while Damien claimed he needed his rest for important meetings. Every milestone I'd celebrated while he worked late. All of it had been orchestrated. I watched that recording dozens of times, each viewing cutting deeper than the last. But with each replay, my devastation transformed into something harder, more focused. Rage crystallized into determination. But I wasn't just hurt. I was calculating. For 8 years, I'd been Camden's mother in every way that mattered. I'd sacrificed career opportunities to be home with him. I'd used my inheritance from my grandmother to pay for his private school, his music lessons, his medical expenses. Every legal document listed me as his guardian. Every school record had my signature. Under the law, I had more claim to Camden than Bridget ever did. I spent the next 3 months building an airtight case. I documented every payment I'd made for Camden's care, every school event I'd attended while Damien worked, every medical decision I'd made. Every night I'd stayed up with him during illness. The evidence was staggering. I had receipts for 8 years of clothing, shoes, school supplies, medical bills, dental work, vision exams, birthday parties, Christmas presents. I had videos of first steps, first words, first day of school, all captured by me while Damien was at work or traveling. I had thank you cards from teachers praising my involvement, doctor's notes from appointments I'd scheduled and attended alone, even recordings of Camden's bedtime routine where he'd tell me about his dreams and fears. The medical records alone painted a devastating picture. Every vaccination, every wellness check, every emergency room visit, my signature, my insurance, my presence. When Camden broke his arm at age 5, I was the one who held him during the x-rays while Damien claimed he couldn't leave an important client meeting. When Camden had his tonsils removed at 6, I slept in the hospital chair for 3 nights while Damien attended a legal conference in Vegas, a conference that I later discovered was a romantic getaway with Bridget. I also discovered something Damien didn't know I knew. He'd been moving money into offshore accounts, preparing to leave me for Bridget. Our joint savings had been systematically drained. The house was mortgaged to fund his new life. He'd taken out credit cards in my name, maxing them out for cash advances that disappeared into accounts I couldn't trace. The financial devastation was breathtaking. In 18 months, he'd stolen over $200,000 from our marriage. Money I'd earned, money we'd saved together, money from my grandmother's estate that I'd foolishly put into our joint accounts. He'd used my own inheritance to fund his secret life with his mistress. But the most chilling discovery came when I hired a forensic accountant to trace the missing funds. The money hadn't just been spent on hotels and restaurants. Damien had been paying Bridget's rent for 3 years. He'd bought her a car, paid for her rehab stints, even covered her legal fees when she was arrested for possession. He'd essentially been supporting 2 households while telling me we needed to budget carefully. The forensic accountant uncovered even more disturbing details. Damien had opened credit cards using Camden's social security number, building debt in my son's name to fund his affair. He'd forged my signature on refinancing documents, putting our home at risk. He'd even stolen money from Camden's college fund, money my grandmother had specifically left for her great-grandson's education. This is financial abuse on multiple levels, the accountant explained. Identity theft, forgery, embezzlement. We're talking federal crimes here. He was planning to take Camden and disappear. Reynolds showed me flight itineraries Damien had researched, one-way tickets to Costa Rica for 3 passengers. He'd been in contact with international schools, had even started the process of obtaining new passports. The timeline was terrifying. He'd planned to leave the weekend after Thanksgiving, taking Camden on what I thought would be a father-son camping trip. I would have come home to an empty house and a note. The revelation transformed my grief into rage. This wasn't just infidelity, it was calculated destruction of everything I'd built, everyone I loved. He'd planned to steal my child, my money, and my future, while leaving me with nothing but debt and heartbreak. But Damien had made one crucial mistake. He underestimated me. I'd built my psychology practice by understanding human behavior, by recognizing patterns and predicting outcomes. I knew how to document evidence, how to build cases, how to present facts that couldn't be disputed. My clinical training had taught me to remain objective even under emotional stress. I became a woman on a mission. I installed hidden cameras in our home, legal since I owned the property. I recorded every conversation, every phone call, every moment when Damien thought he was safe. The footage revealed a man I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating, dismissive. When Camden wasn't around, Damien would take calls from Bridget, discussing their plans with casual cruelty. She suspects something, I heard him say one evening, while I pretended to sleep upstairs. But she's too weak to do anything about it. By Christmas, we'll be gone and she can rot here with her bills. What about the kid? Bridget asked. You sure he won't miss her? Damien laughed, a sound that chilled me to the bone. He'll forget about her in 6 months. Kids are resilient. Besides, she was never really his mother anyway, just a convenient babysitter who worked for free. What if she tries to fight us legally? With what money? I've cleaned out every account. She'll be too busy trying to pay rent to hire a decent lawyer. And even if she does, what court would give custody to a non-biological parent over the real father? That conversation became Exhibit A in my custody filing. The recordings revealed more than just their escape plans. They detailed years of manipulation and psychological abuse I hadn't even recognized. Damien described how he deliberately undermined my confidence, isolated me from friends, and made me financially dependent on him. The key is making them think every decision is their idea, he told Bridget during one particularly chilling call. She thinks she chose to stay home with Camden, but I've been steering her away from career opportunities for years. She thinks she's being a good mother, but really she's just cheap labor. During those 3 months of preparation, I maintained perfect normalcy. I cooked Damien's favorite meals, attended his work functions, smiled at his colleagues who had no idea they were dining with a sociopath. I helped Camden with homework, attended his soccer games, and tucked him in each night while my heart shattered and rebuilt itself stronger. But the strain was enormous. I lost 15 pounds, developed insomnia, and started having panic attacks in private moments. My doctor prescribed anxiety medication, which I hid from Damien. My sister noticed the change during our weekly phone calls. You sound different, she said one Thursday evening. Tired, stressed. I wanted to tell her everything, but I couldn't risk word getting back to Damien through family networks. Just work stuff, I lied. A difficult case. Promise me you'll take care of yourself. Camden needs you healthy. Those words proved prophetic in ways she couldn't have imagined. But I was also meeting with lawyers, accumulating evidence, and preparing for war. My attorney, Rebecca Martinez, was a specialist in high-conflict custody cases. When I first walked into her office with 3 boxes of documentation, she was skeptical. Most people think they have more evidence than they actually do, she warned. Emotion clouds judgment. 2 hours later, after reviewing bank statements, recordings, photographs, and Bridget's confession, Rebecca's demeanor had completely changed. "This is the most comprehensive case of custodial fraud I've seen in 20 years," she said. "If even half of this is admissible, you'll not only win custody, you'll destroy him professionally." Rebecca was a force of nature, a former prosecutor who'd switched to family law after watching too many women lose their children to abusive ex-husbands with better lawyers. She'd built her reputation representing underdogs against powerful men who thought money could buy justice. "Your husband made a critical error," she explained during our second meeting. "He assumes the system will protect him because he's the biological father with more money. But family court isn't about biology or bank accounts. It's about the best interests of the child. And every piece of evidence points to you as Camden's psychological parent." We spent weeks organizing the evidence chronologically, building a narrative that would be impossible to refute. Rebecca brought in a forensic accountant to trace every stolen dollar, a child psychologist to evaluate Camden's attachment patterns, and even a technology expert to verify the authenticity of the recordings. "The key," Rebecca explained, "is showing that you acted in good faith while he acted with deliberate deception. You believed you were adopting his child and building a family. He was using you as free labor while planning his escape. But we needed more than evidence. We needed strategy." Rebecca filed for an emergency custody hearing, citing flight risk and financial fraud. She also filed for a restraining order preventing Damien from taking Camden out of state, freezing all joint accounts, and requiring him to surrender his passport. The papers were served on a Tuesday evening while Camden was at soccer practice. I'll never forget the look on Damien's face when the sheriff handed him that envelope. Confusion melted into panic as he read the contents. By the time he looked up at me, standing in our kitchen with my arms crossed, his skin had gone gray. "You can't do this," he whispered. "I already did," I replied calmly. "He tried to call his phone, but I'd had the number changed. He tried to access our bank accounts, but they were frozen. He tried to book a flight, but his passport had been confiscated that afternoon by federal marshals. Apparently, attempting to steal $200,000 and flee the country constitutes a flight risk." "Where's Camden?" he demanded. "Safe," I said, "and he's going to stay that way." For the first time in our 12-year relationship, I watched Damien completely lose control. He screamed, he threatened, he even threw a glass against the wall, all while I recorded everything on my phone. "You're destroying our family," he shouted. "No," I said quietly. "You destroyed it the day you decided I was disposable." The transformation was remarkable. The charming, successful lawyer I'd married revealed himself as a petulant child when his carefully constructed lies crumbled. He called me names I'd never heard him use, threatened consequences I knew he couldn't deliver, and made demands he had no power to enforce. "You'll never survive without me," he sneered. "You have no money, no real career, no skills beyond changing diapers. I made you everything you are." "Then you made someone strong enough to survive without you," I replied. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following Friday. Damien hired the most expensive lawyer in the state, a man named Preston who specialized in protecting wealthy men from their wives. I'd done my research. Preston had helped 3 different clients hide assets during divorce proceedings, all while claiming they were protecting the children from vindictive mothers. But Preston hadn't dealt with someone like me. Preston's strategy was immediately clear: paint me as an unstable woman having a breakdown over marital problems. He filed counter motions claiming I was using Camden as a weapon against Damien, that my accusations were fantasies born of jealousy and desperation. "My client acknowledges the marriage has problems," Preston argued in his preliminary brief, "but those problems don't justify alienating a child from his biological father. Mrs. Thorne's extreme actions suggest she's not acting in Camden's best interests." Rebecca anticipated this approach. "They're going to claim you're crazy," she warned. "Hysterical, vindictive. It's the oldest strategy in the book. Discredit the woman's mental state so her evidence looks like delusion." But we had something Preston didn't expect: objective documentation spanning years. The first bombshell came when Rebecca played Bridget's recorded confession in open court. Preston objected repeatedly, but the recording was too detailed, too specific, too damaging to dismiss. Bridget described not just the affair, but the planning sessions where she and Damien had mapped out their deception. "He showed me pictures of her," Bridget said on the recording. "Said she was lonely and desperate enough to believe anything. He called her pathetic. Said she'd probably thank him for letting her play mommy while he figured out how to get rid of her." The judge's expression grew darker with each revelation. Preston tried to discredit Bridget's testimony, pointing out her history of drug abuse and mental health issues. But the recording was too coherent, too detailed, and too consistent with other evidence to dismiss as the ravings of an addict. The second bombshell was the financial evidence. Rebecca presented a PowerPoint showing exactly where every stolen dollar had gone: Bridget's rent, her car payments, her credit cards, even her drug rehabilitation costs. The judge examined each bank statement, each wire transfer, each forged signature. "Mr. Thorne," the judge said finally, "did you authorize these transfers from joint accounts without your wife's knowledge?" Preston whispered urgently in Damien's ear before he answered, "I was supporting the mother of my child during a difficult time." "While planning to abandon your legal wife and steal custody of that same child?" the judge asked. Silence. The third bombshell was the flight itinerary and passport applications. Rebecca had obtained everything through subpoena: emails to travel agents, school applications in Costa Rica, even rental agreements for a house where Damien, Bridget, and Camden would have started their new life. "Your Honor," Rebecca said, "the respondent wasn't just committing adultery. He was orchestrating the kidnapping of a child from the only mother that child has ever known." Preston tried to argue that biological fathers had absolute rights, but family court had evolved beyond such simplistic thinking, especially when those rights were obtained through fraud. But Preston had one more card to play. He called character witnesses, Damien's colleagues, clients, and family members who testified about his reputation as a devoted father and successful professional. They painted a picture of a man who'd made mistakes but deserved a chance to maintain his relationship with his son. Damien's mother took the stand with tears in her eyes, describing how much she loved Camden and how devastating it would be to lose her only grandchild. "Camden is my son's greatest achievement," she testified. "Whatever problems exist between my son and his wife, they shouldn't punish an innocent child." It was manipulative, but effective. Several people in the courtroom were visibly moved by her testimony. Rebecca's cross-examination was surgical. "Mrs. Thorne, how often do you see Camden?" "Every month or so, sometimes more during holidays." "Who typically brings him to visit? Your son or my client?" "Well, usually my daughter-in-law. She's very good about maintaining family connections. And during these visits, who helps Camden with homework, makes his meals, handles his bedtime routine?" "My daughter-in-law, typically. She's very hands-on." "So even during visits with your son's family, my client is the one providing daily care for Camden?" Damien's mother hesitated. "I suppose so, yes." "And are you aware that your son has been systematically stealing money from the accounts my client uses to pay for Camden's school, medical care, and daily needs?" "I don't know anything about their finances." "Are you aware that your son has been planning to relocate Camden to Costa Rica without informing my client?" "I don't believe that's true." Rebecca presented the flight itineraries and school applications. Damien's mother's face crumpled as she realized the extent of her son's deception. "No further questions, Your Honor." The judge granted my emergency petition. Damien was restricted to supervised visitation pending a full custody trial. All joint assets remained frozen. And most satisfying of all, the court ordered Damien to undergo psychological evaluation before any custody decision could be made. "This court is deeply troubled by the evidence of prolonged deception and financial fraud," the judge stated. "The welfare of the minor child is paramount, and that welfare appears to have been consistently provided by the petitioner, not the respondent." As we left the courthouse, Damien cornered me in the parking lot. "You think you've won?" he snarled. "I'll appeal everything. I'll drag this out for years. I'll make sure you spend every penny fighting me." I smiled. "With what money? Everything you stole is frozen, and everything you earned legally is subject to divorce proceedings. Good luck affording Preston for years of appeals." That's when he made his biggest mistake. He grabbed my arm, squeezing hard enough to leave bruises, and leaned close to my face. "I'll destroy you," he whispered. "I'll take Camden and disappear. You'll never see him again." I held up my phone. "Thank you for the threat of kidnapping. The judge will find this very interesting." Damien's supervised visits began the following. The court-appointed supervisor, a social worker named Mrs. Rodriguez, documented everything. Damien's attempts to poison Camden against me, his inappropriate questions about our finances, even his promise to take Camden on a special trip that would last a very long time. The visits were held at a family service center with cameras in every room. Mrs. Rodriguez noted that Damien spent most of his time on his phone, often arguing with someone in hushed tones while Camden played alone with provided toys. "The child appears uncomfortable around the respondent," she wrote in her first report. "He seeks permission before speaking, apologizes frequently for normal childhood behavior, and asks repeatedly when his mother will return." Meanwhile, Camden was thriving under my full custody. Without the tension of Damien's presence, our home became peaceful again. Camden's grades improved, his nightmares stopped, and he started talking about his feelings more openly. "Mom," he said one evening while we worked on his science project, "why does Dad seem so angry all the time now?" I chose my words carefully. "Sometimes adults go through difficult changes, sweetheart. Dad is working through some problems." "Is it because you're getting divorced?" "Partly, but remember, divorce is between Dad and me. It doesn't change how much we both love you." Camden nodded thoughtfully. "I'm glad I get to stay with you. You make the best pancakes." Such a simple statement, but it reinforced everything I was fighting for. Home wasn't just a place. It was feeling safe, loved, understood. Camden had never had that with Damien, who viewed parenting as a performance rather than a relationship. The full custody trial was scheduled for 3 months later, giving both sides time to prepare comprehensive cases. But during those months, Damien made a series of devastating mistakes that sealed his fate. First, he violated the restraining order by showing up at Camden's school, trying to convince the principal to release Camden to him for an emergency family matter. When the school called me instead, I arrived to find Damien arguing with security while Camden hid in the nurse's office, terrified and crying. "I just wanted to take him for ice cream," Damien claimed when police arrived. The security footage told a different story. Damien had told the principal that I'd been hospitalized and he needed to collect Camden immediately. When asked for documentation, he'd become aggressive and demanded they comply with his parental rights. He kept saying, "I'm his father," over and over, the principal later testified, but he couldn't provide any verification of his story, and his demeanor became increasingly hostile when we followed standard protocol. Second, he contacted Bridget and convinced her to recant her recorded confession. But Bridget made a crucial error. She claimed she'd been coerced into lying, then immediately contradicted herself by providing details that could only have come from personal experience. When Rebecca cross-examined her during deposition, Bridget broke down and admitted Damien had offered her $50,000 to change her story. "He said if I helped him get Camden back, we could finally be a real family," she sobbed. "But I know that's not true anymore. He's not the same person. He's become someone scary." Third, and most damaging, Damien hired his own private investigator to follow me, looking for evidence of unfit parenting. What the investigator documented instead was a devoted mother living a quiet, stable life, focused entirely on her child's well-being. The photos showed me at parent-teacher conferences, soccer games, library story time, doctor appointments, a mundane but beautiful picture of consistent, loving care. But Damien's investigator also captured something unexpected, evidence of Damien's own unfitness. Following me meant documenting everyone in Camden's orbit, including Damien during his supervised visits. The photos showed Damien on his phone during most of their time together, often arguing loudly with someone, presumably Bridget, while Camden played alone. One particularly damaging photo showed Damien meeting with a known drug dealer, the same man who'd supplied Bridget during her addiction. When confronted, Damien claimed he was trying to help Bridget get clean, but the investigation revealed he'd been purchasing pills for her throughout their relationship. He's been enabling her addiction for years, Reynolds explained during his testimony, buying her drugs, paying for her housing, essentially keeping her dependent on him. This isn't the behavior of someone who should have custody of a child. By the time the full trial began, Damien's case had collapsed entirely. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Rebecca called 17 witnesses, teachers who testified about my involvement in Camden's education, coaches who praised my dedication to his sports activities, neighbors who described my exemplary parenting, medical professionals who confirmed I'd made every healthcare decision for 8 years, and child development experts who explained the irreparable damage that would result from removing Camden from my care. Camden's second-grade teacher, Mrs. Patterson, provided particularly powerful testimony. In 30 years of teaching, I've never seen a more devoted parent, she said. She volunteers in the classroom, helps with field trips, and always responds immediately to any concerns about Camden's welfare. When Camden had trouble with multiplication, she worked with him every night until he mastered it. When he was struggling socially, she arranged play dates and taught him friendship skills. She's not just his mother, she's his advocate, his protector, his biggest supporter. Dr. Williams, Camden's pediatrician for 8 years, testified about my consistent involvement in every aspect of his medical care. I've seen thousands of families in my practice, he said. Mrs. Thorne is the most informed, engaged parent I've ever worked with. She maintains detailed health records, asks thoughtful questions, and follows medical advice precisely. When Camden had recurring ear infections, she researched treatment options and advocated for the specialized care that ultimately solved the problem. Mr. Thorne, in contrast, has attended perhaps 3 appointments in 8 years. The most powerful testimony came from Camden himself. At 8 years old, he was considered mature enough to express his preferences to the judge in private chambers. I wasn't allowed to hear what he said, but when he emerged, he ran straight to me and hugged my legs. I told him I want to stay with you, he whispered. I said, you're my real mom. Later, through Rebecca, I learned some of what Camden had shared with the judge. He described our daily routines, his favorite memories with me, and his confusion about why his father seemed angry all the time now. Most heartbreaking was his admission that he'd been having nightmares about being taken away from me. He told the judge that he loves his father but feels safe with his mother, Rebecca explained. He said home is wherever I am. Preston's defense strategy was simple. Biology trumps everything. He argued that Damien's mistakes were those of a man driven to desperation by an overbearing wife who'd stolen his son's affections. He painted me as a manipulative woman who'd exploited Damien's guilt to insert myself into a relationship that wasn't mine to claim. Ladies and gentlemen, Preston said during his opening statement, this case is about a woman who couldn't have children of her own, so she decided to steal someone else's child. She spent 8 years deliberately alienating Camden from his biological father, turning him against the man who gave him life. It was a compelling narrative, designed to tap into primal fears about false accusations and overreaching women. Preston called expert witnesses who testified about parental alienation syndrome, suggesting I'd systematically brainwashed Camden against Damien. But Preston made a fatal error during closing arguments. He claimed that women couldn't be trusted with custody decisions because they were too emotional to act in children's best interests. The judge, a woman who'd built her career fighting exactly that kind of prejudice, visibly bristled. Are you suggesting, counselor, that emotional connection to a child is a disqualifying factor in custody determinations? She asked coldly. Preston tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. His outdated sexist assumptions had undermined his entire case. Rebecca's closing was masterful. She presented a timeline showing that for 8 years, I'd been Camden's consistent caregiver while Damien pursued his own interests. She demonstrated that Camden's stability, happiness, and development had all flourished under my care. And she reminded the court that family wasn't just about DNA. It was about devotion, sacrifice, and unconditional love. Your Honor, Rebecca concluded, biology doesn't make someone a parent. Daily acts of love make someone a parent. Staying up all night with a sick child makes someone a parent. Sacrificing career opportunities to attend school plays makes someone a parent. Fighting for a child's best interests, even when it's difficult, makes someone a parent. And by every measure that matters, my client is Camden's true mother. The judge deliberated for 2 hours. When he returned, his expression was resolute. This case represents one of the most egregious examples of parental deception I've encountered in 30 years on the bench, he began. The respondent's systematic fraud, financial crimes, and demonstrated unfitness create a clear and convincing case for transferring full custody to the petitioner. Damien shot to his feet. You can't do this. He's my biological son, Mr. Thorne. You will sit down and remain silent, the judge commanded. Biology alone does not determine custody when it's been obtained through fraud, maintained through deception, and exercised without regard for the child's welfare. He continued, the petitioner has demonstrated 8 years of exemplary parenting. She has provided stability, consistency, and unconditional love. She has made significant financial sacrifices for this child's welfare. She has been present for every milestone, every crisis, every ordinary moment that comprises a childhood. The respondent, in contrast, has demonstrated chronic dishonesty, financial irresponsibility, and a fundamental disregard for his child's emotional needs. I was awarded full legal and physical custody of Camden. Damien received supervised visitation rights 1 weekend per month, pending completion of parenting classes, psychological counseling, and anger management therapy. Furthermore, the judge continued. The court finds that Mr. Thorne's financial crimes constitute a form of child abuse, as they directly threatened the stability and security of the minor child. The court orders full restitution of all stolen funds plus punitive damages. As we left the courthouse, Damien grabbed my arm one final time. "This isn't over," he hissed. "I'll appeal. I'll fight this forever." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. This man I'd loved for 12 years, who I'd built a life with, who I'd trusted completely. He was a stranger. "No, you won't," I said quietly, "because I have evidence of tax evasion, money laundering, and interstate fraud. If you appeal this decision, I'll make sure every federal agency knows about your crimes. You'll spend the next decade in prison instead of fighting for custody." His face went ashen. "You wouldn't. Try me." He never appealed. The aftermath was both satisfying and surreal. Damien's law firm quietly encouraged him to resign after news of the custody trial spread through legal circles. Representing clients while fighting fraud charges wasn't good for business. He took a position with a small personal injury practice across town, earning a fraction of his former salary. The legal community is surprisingly small. Word spread quickly about Damien's fraud, his theft, his attempted kidnapping. Other lawyers whispered about his ethical violations. Clients requested different representation. His reputation, built over 15 years, crumbled in a matter of months. Bridget attempted one final manipulation, claiming she wanted to be part of Camden's life now that she was clean, but her parental rights had been legally terminated, and her recent perjury during the trial eliminated any sympathy the court might have shown. "She's burned every bridge," Rebecca explained. Even if she genuinely wanted a relationship with Camden, the court would never allow it after her attempts to deceive them. The divorce settlement was generous, to me. Since Damien had stolen most of our assets, the judge awarded me everything that remained, plus alimony and child support based on his former salary. The house, the savings accounts, even his pension, all mine. "The respondent's financial fraud justifies this disproportionate division," the judge explained. "He cannot benefit from his own wrongdoing. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was watching Camden flourish." 6 months later, our divorce was finalized. I received not just half of our legitimate assets, but compensation for everything he'd stolen, plus punitive damages for the fraud. Damien was left with debt, supervised visitation, and a ruined reputation. Without the stress of his parents' toxic relationship, Camden became a different child. He started 4th grade with confidence, joined the debate team, and began taking piano lessons. He made friends easily and invited them over for sleepovers, something he'd never done when Damien lived with us. "I like our house better now," he told me one evening. "It feels happy." The change was remarkable. Camden's teacher noted improvements in his concentration, his willingness to participate in class discussions, even his handwriting. His soccer coach commented on his increased enthusiasm and team spirit. Most importantly, he started expressing his emotions more freely, something he'd rarely done during Damien's reign of emotional manipulation. Damien's supervised visits became increasingly strained. Mrs. Rodriguez documented his attempts to undermine my authority, his inappropriate gifts, expensive toys I couldn't afford, designed to make me look cheap, and his constant questioning about our life without him. "Does mommy have a boyfriend?" he'd ask Camden. "Are you happy living in that small house? Do you miss our old life when we had more money? Don't you think it's unfair that I can only see you once a month?" Camden began dreading these visits. He'd come home quiet and withdrawn, needing hours to return to his normal, cheerful self. After 6 months, the court-appointed child psychologist recommended reducing Damien's visitation to once per month. "The child experiences significant anxiety before and after contact with his biological father," she wrote. "This suggests that continued visitation may be detrimental to his emotional development. The child has expressed fears that his father will try to take him away from his primary caregiver, creating ongoing psychological distress." Meanwhile, I was rebuilding our life from scratch. I'd lost most of our savings to Damien's theft, but the alimony and child support allowed me to rent a small house near Camden's school. I returned to work full-time, building my psychology practice while Camden attended after-school care. Our life was simpler now. Fewer restaurants, fewer vacations, more careful budgeting, but it was also more honest. Camden learned the value of hard work by watching me rebuild our financial stability. He learned that love wasn't about expensive gifts, but about showing up consistently. We developed new traditions to replace the hollow rituals of our marriage. Saturday morning pancakes became sacred time, just the two of us talking about everything and nothing. Sunday evening walks around our neighborhood became opportunities for Camden to share his thoughts about school, friends, and dreams for the future. "Mom," he said during one of these walks, "I'm glad Dad doesn't live with us anymore." The honesty of the statement hit me like a punch to the stomach. "Why, sweetheart?" "Because he made you sad. And when you're sad, it makes the whole house feel sad. 8-year-olds see more than we think they do." 1 year after gaining custody, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible during my marriage. I legally adopted Camden. Since Damien's parental rights hadn't been terminated entirely, this required his consent. I expected a fight. Instead, his lawyer called with a surprising message. "My client is willing to relinquish his parental rights in exchange for termination of child support obligations," Preston said. The offer was both shocking and revealing. Damien valued money more than his relationship with Camden. "Counteroffer," Rebecca replied. "He terminates his rights, child support continues until Camden turns 18, and he agrees never to contact Camden again without Camden's explicit consent as an adult." 2 weeks later, Damien signed the papers. But the process wasn't simple. The court required extensive documentation proving that termination of parental rights served Camden's best interests. We had to demonstrate that Damien had essentially abandoned his parental role, that his continued involvement was harmful to Camden's development, and that I was prepared to assume full legal responsibility for Camden's future. The evidence was overwhelming. Mrs. Rodriguez's reports documented Damien's increasingly erratic behavior during supervised visits. He'd started missing appointments entirely, claiming work emergencies that his employer later confirmed were fabrication. When he did show up, he spent most visits on his phone, arguing with creditors about his mounting debts. The final straw came when Damien attempted to use Camden as a messenger for adult conflicts. During one visit, he gave Camden a letter to bring home to me, a rant about how I destroyed his life and stolen his son. Camden read part of it before I intercepted it, leaving him confused and upset about adult problems he couldn't understand. The respondent's behavior demonstrates a fundamental inability to separate his anger toward the petitioner from his relationship with the child, the court-appointed psychologist wrote. His continued contact with the child appears to serve his emotional needs rather than the child's welfare. The adoption hearing was held on a Tuesday morning in family court. Camden, now 9 years old, wore his best shirt and stood beside me as the judge made our relationship legally permanent. "Do you understand that this means your mother will be your legal parent forever?" the judge asked Camden. "She already was," Camden replied solemnly. "This just makes it official." The judge smiled, the first time I'd seen him show emotion during our long legal battle. "That's exactly right, young man." That evening, we celebrated with pizza and ice cream. Camden designed new artwork for our refrigerator, a family portrait showing just the two of us, holding hands under a rainbow. At the bottom, he wrote, "Forever Family," in his careful 9-year-old handwriting. "Are you sad that Dad won't visit anymore?" I asked carefully. Camden considered the question seriously. "A little, but mostly I'm glad we don't have to pretend anymore." "Pretend what?" "That he really wanted to be here, with me. It always felt like he was thinking about somewhere else." The wisdom of children never ceases to amaze me, but our challenges weren't over. Damien's financial destruction had left me with significant debt. Credit cards he'd maxed out in my name, tax liabilities from his hidden income, even legal fees from the custody battle. Despite winning, rebuilding our life required years of careful budgeting and hard work. I took on additional clients, sometimes working evenings and weekends while Camden did homework at my office. He learned to entertain himself quietly during therapy sessions, completing school projects at the small desk I set up for him in my waiting room. "I like coming to work with you," he told me one evening. "It makes me feel important." Those words reminded me that children don't need perfect circumstances. They need consistency, love, and the security of knowing they matter. 2 years after the adoption, I met someone, a widowed father named Derek, whose daughter Emma attended Camden's school. Our relationship developed slowly, built on friendship and shared values rather than passion and promises. Derek understood that Camden and I were a package deal, and he never tried to replace anyone in our lives. Derek's approach to our relationship was everything Damien's hadn't been: honest, transparent, and respectful of boundaries. He introduced us to Emma gradually, allowing the children to set the pace for our blended friendship. He never made assumptions about his role in Camden's life, instead earning trust through consistent, genuine care. The contrast was stark. Where Damien had been controlling and deceptive, Derek was open and collaborative. Where Damien had viewed Camden as property to be claimed, Derek saw him as a person to be respected. Where Damien had demanded instant loyalty, Derek patiently built authentic relationships. When Derek proposed 18 months later, he asked Camden's permission first. "I'm not trying to be your dad," he explained during a private conversation with Camden. "You already have a mom who loves you completely, and that's all the family anyone really needs. I just want to be part of your family, if you'll have me." Camden thought about it for a week before giving his approval. "But Mom is still the boss," he stipulated, "and I get to keep my last name." Derek laughed. "Deal." We married the following spring in a small ceremony with Camden as ring bearer and Derek's daughter Emma as flower girl. Camden walked me down the aisle, grinning proudly as he placed my hand in Derek's. "Take good care of her," he whispered to Derek. "She's the best mom in the world." The wedding was everything my first marriage hadn't been: genuine, joyful, and focused on building a life together rather than maintaining appearances. Camden and Emma bonded as siblings. Derek and I supported each other as equal partners, and our blended family found its rhythm naturally. But even in happiness, I remained vigilant. Damien's betrayal had taught me to trust carefully, to maintain my independence, and to prioritize Camden's welfare above all else. Derek understood and respected these boundaries, never pushing for changes that might threaten the stability Camden and I had built. Today, Camden is 12 years old and thriving. He's an honor student, plays 3 instruments, and volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends. He has no contact with Damien, though I've saved all the legal documents in case he ever wants to know the full story. Camden calls Derek by his first name, not Dad, which suits everyone perfectly. Derek's role in our family is valued but clearly defined. He's a mentor, a friend, and a source of stability. But he's not trying to replace the father Camden lost or become something he's not. Emma and Camden have become genuine siblings, supporting each other through the challenges of adolescence with a loyalty that comes from choosing family rather than simply inheriting it. They've learned that families can be built in many ways, and that love is more important than biology or legal documents. Sometimes people ask if I worry about Camden learning the full truth, that I'm not his biological mother, that his father tried to steal him away, that our family was built on someone else's deception. But Camden already knows the parts that matter. He knows I chose him every day for 8 years before I legally had to. He knows I fought for him when others would have walked away. He knows that love isn't about biology. It's about showing up. We've had age-appropriate conversations about his origins as he's grown older. He knows that Damien and Bridget are his biological parents, that they had different plans for his life, and that sometimes adults make choices that hurt children. He knows I adopted him not because I had to, but because I wanted to make our family official. Do you ever wonder about her? I asked him recently, referring to Bridget. Camden shrugged. Sometimes, but not in a missing way. More like wondering if she has my eyes or something. You're my mom. She's just the person who had me. His casual acceptance of our reality amazes me. To Camden, our family isn't complicated or unusual. It's simply home. Last month, Camden had to write an essay about his hero for English class. He chose me. My mom isn't famous or rich or powerful, he wrote, but she's the strongest person I know. When bad things happened to our family, she didn't give up. She fought for what was right. She taught me that love is something you do, not just something you feel. She saved me, and I didn't even know I needed saving. I cried reading that essay. Not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. The essay continued. Some kids have parents who gave birth to them. I have a parent who chose me every single day for my whole life. Some kids have parents who stay because they have to. I have a parent who stayed because she wanted to. Some kids have parents who love them when it's easy. I have a parent who loved me when it was hard. That's why she's my hero. His teacher called that evening to praise his writing, but also to share her emotional response to his essay. In 30 years of teaching, I've never read anything more moving, she said. You've raised an extraordinary young man. Damien thought he was using me to raise his child while he lived his double life. Instead, he gave me the greatest gift imaginable. A son who calls me mom and means it with his whole heart. People sometimes ask if I regret the years of deception, the pain of discovery, the exhausting custody battle. I don't. Because without Damien's betrayal, I never would have fought for Camden the way I did. I would have stayed in a loveless marriage, raising a child who belonged to people who saw him as property, rather than a person. I would have continued enabling Damien's emotional abuse, teaching Camden that love meant accepting disrespect and deception. Instead, I found my strength. I learned that being a mother isn't about biology. It's about fierce, unconditional love. It's about putting someone else's needs above your own, day after day, year after year. It's about showing up when it's difficult, fighting when it's necessary, and choosing love even when it costs everything. And I've been showing up for Camden since the day he was born. I'll keep showing up until the day I die. The irony isn't lost on me. Damien spent 8 years planning to escape with Camden, thinking he was smarter than everyone around him. He manipulated financial systems, legal documents, and human emotions with the precision of a master criminal. But his deception became his downfall. His lies became my evidence. His betrayal became my motivation. He thought he was playing a long game, but I was playing a longer one. Damien may have given Camden life, but I gave him everything else that matters. Security, stability, unconditional love, and the knowledge that he's worthy of all three. I gave him a home where emotions are safe, where questions are encouraged, where mistakes are learning opportunities rather than punishments. Most importantly, I gave him the knowledge that family isn't about obligation or biology. It's about choice. Every day, I choose to be his mother. Every day, he chooses to be my son. That mutual choice, renewed daily through small acts of love and care, is stronger than any legal document or genetic connection. And in the end, love won over manipulation, truth won over deception, devotion won over biology, consistency won over chaos, maternal instinct won over paternal rights. Camden is home where he belongs, with the woman who chose to be his mother every single day, who fought for him when he couldn't fight for himself, who built a life around his happiness and security. The legal system worked the way it should have, not by privileging biology over best interests, but by recognizing that families are built through daily acts of love, not accidents of genetics. The judge understood that Camden's welfare depended on stability, consistency, and emotional security, all things I'd provided while Damien pursued his selfish interests. Some people say I stole Camden from his real parents, but you can't steal what was always yours. And Camden was always mine, not because of legal documents or custody arrangements, but because of choice. Every sleepless night, every scraped knee, every proud moment, every worried prayer, I chose to be his mother. That choice made all the difference. When I look at Camden now, confident, kind, academically successful, emotionally intelligent, I see the result of 8 years of consistent, loving care. I see a child who knows he's valued, protected, and unconditionally loved. I see someone who will grow into a man capable of healthy relationships because he learned what real love looks like. Damien's legacy is debt, broken relationships, and professional ruin. My legacy is a thriving child who will someday be a loving partner, devoted parent, and contributing member of society. That's the only victory that matters. Camden often asks about our future plans, excited about high school, college, and the adventures ahead. He talks about careers he might pursue, places he wants to travel, and goals he hopes to achieve. In all these conversations, he assumes I'll be there. Not because he has to include me, but because he wants to share his life with me. When I'm in college, can I call you every day? He asked recently. You can call me whenever you want, for as long as you want, for the rest of your life, I told him. Good, he said, satisfied, because you're the first person I want to tell when good things happen. That simple statement encapsulates everything we've built together. A relationship based on mutual choice, genuine affection, and shared history. Camden doesn't love me because he's supposed to. He loves me because I've earned that love through thousands of small acts of care and devotion. As I write this, Camden is in his room doing homework while Derek helps Emma with her science project downstairs. Our house is filled with the comfortable sounds of family life. Music playing, voices chatting, the dishwasher humming in the kitchen. It's ordinary and beautiful, and everything I never knew I wanted. Damien probably thought he was taking everything from me when he planned his escape. Instead, he gave me everything that matters. The chance to prove that love really can conquer all. that families can be chosen as well as born, and that sometimes the best revenge is living a genuinely happy life. Camden is my son, not because of biology or legal documents, but because we chose each other. Every single day for 12 years, we've made that choice again. And every day for the rest of our lives, we'll keep choosing each other. That's what real family means. That's what real love looks like. And that's the only truth that matters.